Okay, let's have a look at some different threads. We've looked at needles in a previous video. I would also just like to mention scissors. Embroidery scissors are terribly important. They don't have to be expensive, but they really should be kept for only cutting threads and fabric. You can get some really good quality scissors for under $10, and then you can get some stunning scissors for, well, just lots of money. But if you're just starting out, some really good basic scissors are all that you need. They just have to have a good clean blade so that they cut your threads cleanly. That's all they have to be able to do, is just simply cut the threads cleanly and not snag on a thread. So it just needs to be able to do a nice good cut. When you go to do your embroidery, you will cut anything from about 30 centimeters to maybe 50 centimeters, just depending on the thread that you're using and how long you're comfortable having the thread in your needle. Now, when you do embroidery and needlepoint, one of the hardest things to do is to thread the needle. I have threaded needles just thousands and thousands of times, so in actual fact I could thread this needle without even looking at it. When you go to thread a needle, there's a couple of different tricks, and I will admit I'm using a very large-eyed needle so that you can see what I'm doing. If you've got a good clean cut to the edge of your thread, you can simply squash it in between your thumb and first finger and wriggle the needle over that cut edge. Now I have just very easily threaded 6 strands a strand of cotton, but you may take a little longer than that to do it. If you've got a thread, and I'm going to talk about these threads in a minute, if you've got a thread like a pearl cotton, again this is the way I nearly always thread my pearl cottons, is I simply hold that thread squash it very firmly in between my fingers and just wriggle the needle over the top. Threading wool is a bit different, and there's one thing you don't do in my classes. If you were sitting in a classroom with me, I can close my eyes to all sorts of things, but people who lick their threads are not really encouraged to do it. There are exceptions, but most of the time I encourage you not to lick a thread. So, what are we going to do if we don't lick our thread? And please don't lick a wool thread. This is a fine embroidery wool that I've just picked up, and what I'm going to do is lay that over the shaft of the needle. And again, as I pull this out, I'm holding the eye of the needle, and as I pull this out, I'm going to squash that thread very firmly in between my thumb and first finger, and then I'm just going to wriggle the eye over the end of that thread. And there I have a threaded needle. There's something you need to know about the eye of needles. Needle eyes are made with machines, of course, and the machines punch out the eye. So one side of your eye is smoother than the other. If you're having trouble threading your needle, just roll your needle over. You may find it works better on the other side. Okay, so to thread a needle, you take the thread, you lay it over the shaft or the length of the needle, you push your thumb and first finger together and you pull the eye out, and then you just wriggle the end of the needle, the eye, over the end of the thread. Now if your thread is really thick, and I'll just go back to pearl cotton, which I'll explain in a minute. If you go back to the pearl cotton, this is quite a thick thread, and oh yes I can, because I've got a very large eyed needle. But if your thread is close to the size of the eye of the needle, you will struggle to do that method if you fold it over the shaft of the needle. So if you've got a thick thread, it's very difficult to lay the thread over the shaft of the needle, pull it out, and then thread it into the eye. So you've just got to work out if the thread will really go through. When you're going to thread the needle by just pushing the eye down over the end of the thread, make sure that the end of the thread has been cut at a slight angle. It always helps. Cut the thread at a slight angle when you're working with a thick thread. It always helps. Now that will quite easily go down, come up through the eye as I push the needle down. Okay, different threads. The most common threads used in embroidery are strand of cotton, or some people call it floss. If you've done a lot of cross stitch, you'll notice that some patterns call it floss. It's exactly the same thing. Strand of cotton has 6 strands to it. So it's a divisible thread. You can work with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 strands, or maybe even more. But strand of cotton has 6 little strands in it, and you can work with as many strands as you want to get the thickness of the design that you're wanting to work with. Strand of cotton is extremely easily available, comes in different brands. In Australia, DMC and maybe Anchor, but DMC is by far the most popular strand of cotton. You may find there's a little treasure box in your house somewhere that belonged to your grandmother or an aunt or a neighbour or someone, and it's bound to have a strand of cotton in it. For embroidery, the thickness of the wools that we use are finer than traditional tapestry wools. So these are what we call an embroidery wool or a crewel wool. So they are finer than a traditional tapestry wool. I work a lot with an Australian brand of threads. There's a wonderful company in Australia called Gum Nut Yarns, and they make a range of threads. And this is a skein of gum nut blossoms, which is 100% wool. This has been taken out of the twist, and I've just got it laying flat. But when you go into a store to buy it, it will look, or if you get some in the kits, some of my beginner kits, I've even include gum nut yarns in them so that you get an idea of a different range of threads. So gum nut yarns, it's hand dyed, so you just get a very, very subtle change in the tone of the colour of the thread. So that's Gum Nut Yarns Blossom. Another thread I use a lot with gum nut is their poppies. Now this thread, this is one that I've opened earlier, and I plait them so that I keep all the strands together. But the poppies is 50% wool and 50% silk. 50% wool and 50% silk. Just a lovely, soft, flexible thread to use. And again, you can thread the poppies by laying it over the shaft of the needle and threading it in through the eye. So that's a poppies, silk and wool. Now, in your beginner kits, no matter whether it's needlepoint or embroidery, and certainly for the needlepoint, I use Pearl Cotton 5 a lot. I use Pearl Cotton 5 a lot. Comes in a couple of brands, 2 or 3 brands. In Australia, DMC is probably the most popular. I work with Anchor quite a bit, and also Presentia. Pearl Cotton 5 can come in a twisted skein like so, and it also comes in a ball. Now with the Pearl Cotton 5, you also get it in a solid colour, and you get them in variegated colours. So this is very subtle in the variation of the colours. So it's just going from a lovely soft pink into a purple, whereas this one has got a lot of fun and variety and dance to it. Variegated threads can make our work really sing and dance, and can make our work very interesting without us having to change the colour of our thread. So that's an introduction to a range of threads that are available for your stitching. Enjoy!